PDF inside of, we have our PDF downloaded from Canvas. And now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and recreate this. So inside of InDesign, I will tell you that this design is actually a US business card. And this is a business card design. So go ahead and click on New File. And let's go to the Print tab. So up here at the top, when you click on New File, you got all these different presets. Click on the Print preset and view all the presets and find the business card. So it should just say US business card right here. Make that selection, and we want to make sure that everything else looks okay. So right now we have set the preset, the width and the height to a US business card. Let's go ahead and work in picas, please. So we'll set that up. It already has the orientation. Doesn't really matter. This is one page, so we could uncheck facing pages if we want. I'm okay with just leaving it checked for right now. We don't really have any gutters. As far as the margins go, what did I say the inch equivalent of 3 picas is? In inches, how many is 3 picas? Not quite an inch and a half. That's a little bit too large. Half inch. Yeah, half an inch. How many picas are in an inch? 6. We all agree? Okay, there are 6 picas in an inch. Therefore, 3 picas is half an inch. Everybody see how that works? Now, a business card is going to be 3.5 inches by 2 inches. I don't know about you, but like half-inch margin just seems a little excessive. Agreed? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this 1/4 of an inch, which means we're going to cut this in half as well. So first off, over here where you have this link, go ahead and make sure that it is linked together. So make sure the icon looks like it is linked, because if it's broken like this, then we would have to change each one of these individually. That might be useful later on, but for right now, we're going to make sure that these are linked. So I want 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 or 0.25 inches, which is half of an inch. So here's my question to you. Right now, my margins are set to half an inch. I want them 1/4 of an inch, which is a half of that. So what is half of 3 picas? Anybody know? 1 pica is 6 points. Why? Yes. So remember your conversions. How many points are in 1 pica? It's 12. Agreed? Some of you are like, I don't remember any of this. I have slept since last week. There are 12 points in a pica. Do we agree about that? Good, because you should. That's the truth. There are 12 points in a pica. So half a pica is how many points? 6. Everybody see how that works? If there are 12 points in a pica, a half a pica is 6 points. Okay? So normally, and this I'm just pointing this out because I just want to get you in the frame set of using picas. If I were to tell somebody what is half of 3 picas, somebody normally would say, well, 1.5. Right? Well, that's true, but in picas, you don't write that as 1.5. Does that make sense? Because in picas, you've got 2 numbers you have to work with. The number to the left of the P is the number of picas that you have, the whole picas. The number to the right of the P is how many points you have left. So 1.5 picas is really 1 pica, 6 points, because half a pica is 6 points. Does that make sense? And again, if this is still like a little, I kind of sort of get it, but I kind of don't, that's okay. The more we actually do this, the better off it'll sink in, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and type 1 pica, 6 points like that. If I tab that over because everything is linked, everything should now be changed. Now, here's the nice thing about these sort of text boxes. Does everybody remember in Illustrator, I said that when you had a measurement like this and you didn't exactly know how to convert that, well, you could just put inches in there, couldn't you? Or points in there, couldn't you? So I could have done, so let me put this back to 3 picas. I could have done this. Watch. 0.25 inches. Converts it for me, right? Or, let me go back to 3. 0.25 inches. Converts it for me. Or 18 points. Converts it for me. So, if I didn't know what it was in picas, but I knew it in points or I knew it in inches, I could put that number here as long as I make sure that I put the unit of measurement, right? If I just put 18, it's going to think 18 picas. Does everybody see that? So you want to make sure that if I knew it was 18 points, I'd have to put 18 PT for points. That way InDesign knows, oh wait, I need to convert this from points to picas because picas is what we're using. Any questions about that? No? Okay. So let's go ahead and create this file, please. Here's what we've got. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these panels here. Okay. Does anybody have their line gauge with them today? Get it out if you've got it. If you don't have it, let me know. Raise your hand if you don't have one. Who else doesn't have them? Anybody else? All right, so I'll need those back before the end of class, by the way. All right. Here's what I want everybody to do. First off, the size of my document, as I have now created it inside of InDesign, can we all agree that is a lot bigger, visually speaking, than an actual business card size, right? If I put a business card up to my monitor, can we agree that's a lot bigger than a business card? Why is that? Yeah, because we're zoomed in, right? Take a look at the bottom left-hand corner of this window. All the way down here. Does everybody see this option down here? Mine says 458%. Everyone see that? Okay. Now, that's the zoom setting. Here's what I want you to do. Click on that and go to, or either type in 100%, or just go ahead and click on the drop down and select 100%. Does everybody get that? All right, so a U.S. business card is 3.5 by 2 inches. Here's what I want to be able to do. I want to make sure that the first thing, as I'm setting up my interface, as I'm working in layout, one of the things that can really help me out is that if I can set up InDesign to display whatever is on my screen, if I zoom in at 100%, that setting is going to show me and is going to render text, pages, elements to the exact size that they would be if I were to print them out. In other words, if I were to be, don't do this yet, if I were to take my ruler and put it up on that monitor at 100%, that page size should be able to be measured at 3.5 by 2 inches. Does that make sense? However, that isn't always going to be the case. You have to make sure that InDesign is set up properly for this to work. So, the first thing that we want to make sure that we do is set our zoom to 100%. Okay, now, we don't have to always work at 100%. We can zoom in and out all we want. It's just when you go to measure, you want to make sure you're set to 100%. But because everybody has a different monitor, and some of us, not judging, but some of us have worse eyesight than others, right? So sometimes the resolution we want on our monitors are a little different. Sometimes we can't read really small fonts and we need to actually increase fonts. However, when we go to measure, all of these things, these variables, the monitor that we have, the resolution that we have, the zoom setting that we have, can all kind of lead to misleading us when it comes to determining what the elements on the page are actually going to look like when we print them out. So here are some steps that I'm going to take you through on how to make sure to set up your InDesign so that when you're zoomed at 100%, you can take your line gauge and you can measure and you're going to get an accurate measurement. So the first thing is zoom at 100%. The second thing is come up to the view menu. And you want to make sure that this option, actual size, is checked. If it is not checked, click on it and make sure it is checked. Now, it should be checked by default. Okay? Does anybody have it unchecked? Okay. All right, so that's the second step. Now, real quick, I am recording this. But if you want to write down these steps and just kind of like keep them in your notes so you can refer to them later on, this would be a good idea to try to take these notes down. So, first step is zoom at 100%. Zoom at 100%. That's step one. Step two, you got to go up to view and you got to make sure actual size is checked. Notice there is a keyboard shortcut for this, and it's Command key and the number 1. If you're on Windows, it would be Control key and the number 1. So that's step 2. Step 3, and this is the one that will get you, because this is only applicable in InDesign. This is a bit of a bug, and you want to make sure that this is set up correctly. A couple years ago, Adobe included a new feature, again, for those of us who have poor eyesight, called User Interface Scaling. So, let me show you where to find this. If you go up here to the InDesign menu, there's an option called Preferences. The third option down is called User Interface Scaling. So, go to InDesign, Preferences, User Interface Scaling. This is the third step. Preferences, User Interface Scaling. All right. This option right here, does everybody see this? By default, your user interface scaling is probably set somewhere around the medium range. Does anybody have anything other than what I'm showing on my screen? See where that dot is right now on that scale? Okay, here's the problem. It used to be, up until about a couple of years ago, that when you zoomed in at 100%, it was actual size. You didn't have to jump through all these hoops. The minute Adobe, though, introduced user interface scaling, it unfortunately threw off your zoom. So even though you're, quote, zoomed at 100%, you're not. You're actually zoomed in at somewhere around like 113.4%, which really threw everybody off. I remember when they first introduced this, and suddenly all the scaling was off, everybody who was used to measuring things on their monitor at 100% started complaining. And like the Adobe board went absolutely insane with people going, how do you fix this? It wasn't until somebody figured out that it was this new feature that was causing the problem. So here's what we want to do. If I were to actually measure what I've got right now here, I bet, and I haven't done this, so I'm just going to do this right now really quick. If I were to measure this, it's probably going to be larger. Yeah, it's larger. It's about 3.75 inches wide. And the height is 2.25. So I'm off by 1/4 of an inch in either direction. It should be 3.5 by 2. So my 100% zoom isn't really 100%. In order to fix this, here's what you've got to do. You've got to move this to small. So click this and drag this to small. However, here's something you need to understand about changing your user interface to a smaller size. Number one, if you had bad eyesight, this may make the interface so small, it may be difficult for you to actually read the text, like in the palettes. So be aware of this. Number two, this setting will not fix anything until you quit InDesign and restart it. So if you have to adjust this, InDesign will not reset until you restart it. It doesn't take an effect until you restart the computer. It's not the computer, excuse me, the application. Any questions about that? So, here's what I'm going to recommend. Only do this when you absolutely need to measure something digitally on your monitor. Okay? When you're just trying to do work and you don't need to measure anything, come back in here and adjust this so that you're comfortable with the user interface. So if you've got bad eyesight, you can come in here, you can make this whatever size you want it to be, and then restart InDesign, you're good, just continue working. I only go through these steps if I need to measure something. Questions about that? Set your user interface to small. Go ahead and click OK, and you'll get a little warning. Now, we don't want to restart just yet because we haven't saved our file. So we're going to save our file, then we'll restart it. So click on Later. And then let's go ahead and save this document. I'm going to save it to my computer. And for this one, I'm just going to call this the final design. That's just the text that was on there. And I'm going to save this to my desktop. So once you have saved that, go ahead and quit InDesign. Once it's quit, reopen up that final design InDesign file. Restart InDesign. So I'm going to go ahead and quit this. Here we go. And I'm going to find my InDesign file, double click on it to reload InDesign, and that should, once it loads back up, I should be now using a smaller interface. And I can double check that. I can go up to InDesign, Preferences, User Interface Scaling. Sure enough, it's set to small. All right, then, here's what I want you to do. Take your zoom after you restart InDesign and you open up your file. Take your zoom, go ahead, put it at 100%. And let's see here. Should work. This monitor is not wanting to work. Never mind. Thank you, InDesign, for totally messing up my demo. Is anybody's monitor exactly 3.5 by 2? Or is it just mine's off? Because I'm probably set it at 100%. Is yours 3.5 by 2? Yeah, is all y'all's 3.5 by 2? Mine's probably going to be off because I'm on a projector. Set it to 100% zoom. Make sure it's 100% zoom. Should be 3.5 by 2 inches. Yours is off too. Okay, go up to view. Actual size, go back to the interface. And you start, restart it. All right, raise your hand if yours is measuring correctly. Okay, raise your hand if it's not measuring correctly. All right, so here's the next question. Let's make sure we're all using the same version of InDesign, shall we? Go up here to InDesign, click on About InDesign. What's the version number under About Adobe or Adobe InDesign? 20.1? 20.1. All right, for those of you who got the wrong measurement, how many of you are using something other than 20.2? Are all of you using something other than 20.2? 21.0? 21.0. 21.0? 21.0?
So but ours would be newer than 10.
Well, yours would be newer than this one. How many people got it right and you're using 20.2 or 20.1? 20, so you're version 20? So everybody who got it wrong is using 21 and everyone who got it right is using 20?
Well, I'm using 21, I got it right.
And you got it right, 21.
I'm using 20 and I got it wrong.
Boy, InDesign is just having a ball with me today. Okay, hold on. See if we can't figure this one out together. All right. So, user interface scan. Okay, hold on. Let's try this something else here. Normally this just works and I don't have a problem. We can move on, but for some reason everyone else is having problems with it. So let me check. Optimize for. The problem is that if you just closed the document and you didn't quit InDesign, the changes didn't take effect. So you have to totally quit the application and then restart the application. So now that we have that working, everybody should be able to set it at 100%, and you should be able to actually measure 3.5 by 2. Are we all good with that? Okay, now, here's the next thing that we're going to do. I have given you a PDF that you've downloaded of this card, and we're actually going to place that inside of InDesign. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we're familiar with how layers work. It works just fine inside of Illustrator, but InDesign does layers as well. However, you'll notice that unlike Illustrator, you're not going to find layers by default over here in the very right-hand column. So come up to the window menu and come down and choose layers. So this is what layers are going to look like. Okay? So I'm going to double click on layer 1. Oh, what in the world? Yep. Double click on layer 1 and I get my layer options, and I'm just going to call this original. Just like that. And this is where I'm going to place my original file. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to actually place that PDF that you downloaded here inside of our InDesign document. Now before we do that, real quick, does everybody recall us actually embedding graphics into Illustrator? Everybody remember that? And I said that there are two ways that you can go about doing this. You can embed the original artwork, which meant that whatever that original artwork was, if it was a 5 megabyte file, it would be placed, it would be basically copied into your Illustrator file. Now your Illustrator file is going to grow like an additional 5 megabytes, right? Because it's actually part of your file. The other way was actually to link to that file. So remember those two options? Okay. By default, Illustrator will embed. So when you go to actually go up and place a graphic in your Illustrator file, it will try to copy all of that data into your Illustrator file. That's the default. And you had to actually check that little box when you were going to select your file to link to it. Everybody remember this, hopefully? Illustrator flips that around. By default, Illustrator wants to link to files. It doesn't want to embed. Okay, now this is a good thing, because when you are actually working in InDesign, remember, this should be the end point of your workflow. Right? You should go into Photoshop, do all your tweaks to your images, Illustrator, do all your illustration stuff, get your copy all kind of set up in, like, say, Microsoft Word or text editor or whatever, and then all of those assets are going to end up being placed in your InDesign layout. Which means if you need to make a change to something, you don't want to embed a copy of it, you just want to link to the original file. So I can go back later if I want to make an edit to the original graphic or image or illustration or text, I can do that, and those changes should then be reflected in my InDesign file. I don't want to have to go through the whole steps of re-embedding a brand new version of it. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions about that? So one of the things that we have to be aware of is when we do this in InDesign, when we actually place graphics or text, any assets whatsoever inside of InDesign, it's going to link to that file, which means where that file currently is when we go to place it is important. And if you move that file, when next time we open up InDesign, InDesign's not going to know where it's at because you've moved it. It's going to try to find it where it was when you placed it. So if you've downloaded that PDF and it's in your downloads folder, and we go to place this PDF, right? And then after we're done with today, you delete it, you throw it away, and then you open up the InDesign file again, is InDesign going to be able to find the file? No, because you deleted it. Or if you move that file to another folder in your computer because you're being responsible, you're organizing your files. If you've placed it first and then you moved it, and then you open up InDesign, InDesign can't find it because you moved it, right? All right, so this is the nature of linking, and we'll talk more about this later. I'm going to give you an assignment when we come back from Thanksgiving where you're going to have to relink assets that are missing or moved or something along those lines. And we'll talk more about this, but I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're about to do, by default, InDesign will create links. It's not going to create a copy of the file. So let's go up to the File menu and find the option. It's about a third of the way down, called Place. Looks like this right here. Place. Not Place from libraries. Place. Click on that. Now, when you do that, you're going to get this option right here. Now, before we go further, somebody go, oh, I know exactly what to do. Click, 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 click. You're going to miss something. So just wait. Don't get click happy on me just yet. Here's what I want you to recognize. This is a familiar interface, right? It's asking you to do what? What's InDesign wanting you to do? Yeah, choose the file that you want to place. Agreed? But underneath that, does everybody see that there are a couple of checkboxes? Okay. Notice the first checkbox says what? Show import options. Everybody see that? Notice how by default it's unchecked. This, if you miss this, this can mess you up. Our file, the one that I gave you, it has trim marks. Agreed? Okay. Which means my file is larger than my document size. Right? Because I have to be able to show the trim marks. Here's a nice thing about InDesign. When we go to place something that has trim marks, I can actually tell InDesign, I just want to place the actual trim size. I don't want to include all the extra stuff that's outside of the trim, like marks or bleeds or any of the other stuff. I can actually tell InDesign exactly what part of the document I want to place. But here's the catch. That only happens if you check Show Import Options. If I don't check that, it's just going to import the original document at its original size. And then I have to spend time resizing the boxes and the frames, and that's a mess. So, first step in placing something, check Show Import Options. Next, after you've done that, let's go ahead and find that final design PDF. Notice the trim marks in the preview. So, step 1, file place. Step 2, check the box that says Show Import Options. Step 3, select your PDF and click Open. You'll get this box right here. These are our import options. Now, if you didn't have Show Import Options selected, it's not going to show.
I Yeah, I clicked it, and I even clicked off my
Place PDF.
picture. Oh.
Click Place PDF if you get that. That's a new option box in version number 21. All right. Now, here's the thing. Can a PDF be more than one page? Yeah. How many of you have ever opened up a PDF before? Yeah. Okay. So if I give you a 50-page PDF, and I'm asking you, I want you to place page number 27. Right? It's like, well, but if I try to place a 50-page PDF, how do I place just page 27? Well, I could open it up in, like, say, a PDF viewer and just extract that one page as a separate file, and then you could go through all of those steps, right? But why would you want to bother? Check this out. When I click Show Import Options, look at this over here. See under the preview? Does everybody see where it says total number of pages? If this was a 50-page PDF, I could actually click this box here and I can actually scroll through and see a preview of every single page that I wanted. Also, check this out. Which page do I want to import? Well, if I wanted to just import page 57, I could import just page 57. Does everybody see that? That gives me a huge amount of flexibility of placing graphics inside of my InDesign document. Okay? Now, the next thing is this Options drop-down. I want you to click on this drop-down that says Options. And notice all of the available options that are here. Okay? By default, it's going to import by the bounding box. Here's all you need to know about that. The original size of the document, right? So if my document was 8 by 10, I'm going to get an 8 by 10. That's what's going to actually import. But notice that there are a lot of other options in here. Click on the one that says trim, because remember, in design, your crop marks are also known as trim marks. If this is an Illustrator file, you may want to choose crop. But if I choose trim, watch what happens to the dashed line in the preview. Watch the dashed line. Ready? Boop. See what happens? That dashed line is going to show you the part of the document that will actually be placed. InDesign will create a frame that's the same size of what that dashed line is showing you. And it's going to place the graphic right in the middle of that for you. Isn't that nice? Now, based on the fact that the PDF that I sent you should in fact be a business card size, if I import to just the trim marks, when I go to place this in a minute, it should be exactly the same size as our document. Any questions about this? All right, so, yes?
Have to have the crop mark or the trim marks on it already, or?
Yes. So here's the thing though, right? If I export this and I don't export it with trim marks, this should already be 3.5 by 2 inches, right? So then I could just default bounding box, that's fine. But if I know I've got a document that has trim marks, I want to make sure when I go to place it, I want to show import options. Just at the very least, just to see if I can actually trim it just to that size. But there may be a reason as to why I want to keep the trim marks. Maybe I'm showing an example of how trim marks work, and this is a handout or something, and this is just an example that's going to be on the page. That could be fine. Maybe this is an imposition, right? Maybe I'm actually creating a parent sheet, and I'm placing these objects on the parent sheet, so I need to keep the trim marks, kind of like what we did inside of Illustrator, right? So that could be the way that you may actually want to keep those trim marks. That's fine. But in our case, I don't want to keep the trim marks. I don't need to see them. I just want to see the trim size. Okay? So you go to File Place, make sure Show Import Options is checked first, then select your file, come in here to the options, make sure you have everything that you want set up, and then click OK. And when you do that, you'll notice that your cursor now looks something like this. You'll get this weird little A looking thing in the corner, and you'll see a preview of the file itself. Does everybody see that? So just like in Illustrator, go ahead and put your cursor in the top left hand corner of your page, and then just simply click one time. That should be placed now. Everybody got that? Now, just to make sure this is in the right place, with this selected, let's come back over here to Properties, and I'm just going to make sure my reference point is set in the top left-hand corner, and my X and Y is set to 0. That way I know it's been placed in the right position. How are we feeling? We okay? Okay, good. Now, go ahead and let's go back to our Layers panel, and we can go ahead and lock that down for the time being. That way it won't actually move. Next thing I want to point out. Does everybody see in my design how you can actually see the margin? That kind of magenta line within my design? That's actually showing you the margin, right? Now, on your keyboard, everyone look at your keyboard. Look at it. Find the key that's marked with the W. Does everybody see it? Press it. One time. Boop. What changed? Background. What did it change to? You have to make sure you're not in a box when you press W. You just hit escape a couple times and then you can hit W. There you go. Now press W. There you go. All right, so the background changed, right? So it went from like a dark gray to a lighter gray. And what else changed? Or what else disappeared? Yeah, the margin's gone. Does everybody see that? Now, here's what we are now in. We are now in preview mode. All right? So if I've got a bunch of text frames all over the place, and maybe I've got some assets out in the pasteboard area, right? Which is that kind of like darker area outside, like in, you know, in Illustrator, that area outside of the artboard, right? We can have stuff that's kind of sitting over there. I may have a bunch of stuff out in the middle of nowhere that's not actually part of the design. When you press W, though, you're actually switching to preview mode, and this will actually show you what the design will look like when you actually go to print it. Okay, it's pretty nice. So you just hit W again to go back into your edit mode. Everything's fine.
Does that work on my PC?
Yeah, also, yes, same key on PC. Yeah, absolutely. W. W is going to be your best friend. Now, of course, here's the problem, right? If I were to sit here and let's say, let me unlock this and I'll select this. Let's say I have this selected and I have this highlighted, my X value, right? If I press W, uh-oh, nothing's happening. Why isn't it going to preview mode? Well, why it's not going to preview mode is because I'm typing a bunch of W's in this box. Everybody see that? So that's why it's probably not going to work. Also, here's another thing. If I have a text frame and I have that selected and I've got the insertion point blinking, does everybody see that? And I press W, it's like, okay, I'm going to go to preview mode. Oh no, why is it not working? Well, because I'm typing W's in a text frame, right? That's the reason why. So that's the reason why you don't want to do that. All right. How are we feeling so far? Are we okay? All right. Now, next thing that we want to do is we want to redesign this. We actually want to set this up. Now, before we do that, though, I need to know what font size this is. Agreed? But we just painstakingly went through steps to make sure that our display, if we zoom at 100%, I can actually use my line gauge to measure things, right? But here's the thing. How do we measure font size? What's the two things we need to know? Ascender and descender. Agreed? Okay. But is the descender anywhere near any of our ascenders? No. So here's what I want you to do. First, let's zoom in. On your keyboard, press the command key and then the plus symbol, which is right next to delete. Okay? Just zoom in a bit, just so we have it nice and big. We're going to use a guide. So, because here's the thing. Do not, under any circumstances, grab a pen or a Sharpie and mark on the monitor. Ask me why I am actually saying this. It has happened in the past. Don't do that. Your monitor is not to be written on. So, here's the thing. We need to actually create a horizontal line here across all of our ascenders. So put your cursor in the top ruler up here, right? Click and drag down to create those rules. Remember, we created this before in Illustrator. It's the same way. Just kind of have that line touch the very top of our fonts, our ascenders. Okay? Everybody get it? Doesn't have to be pixel perfect accurate, but just close enough where it's touching. Then zoom to 100%. So you can either go down to that little menu down there, click 100%, or command minus until you get to 100%. So there's 100% right there. Then all you have to do is take your line gauge and measure from that little rule line, that little ruler that we created, that guide, down to the bottom of the G. What do you get? Approximately. Just line it up to the bottom of the G. The 0 point should be that blue guide down to the bottom of the G. What are we getting? 30. That's an interesting guess. Roughly 30? How many people have around 30? Does that sound good? 30, 30, 29, 30, 31, 30. Should be 30. Now, keep in mind where you put that guide is going to matter, right? If you're cutting off part of the ascenders, your guide's probably a little bit too low. This is also where having a transparent line gauge can sometimes kind of mess you up a little bit. So in my case, if I've got my points and I'm actually looking at this right here, it's a little bit easier with something that is, in fact, solid. Now, the other problem is where are you looking at it in the monitor, right? You can introduce parallax. So if you're looking up top, you may not have that line centered exactly on your guide. But try to play around with that a little bit. You should get 30 points. Okay? Now, would it have been easier if I just printed this out and measured it?
That's one.
Yeah, you could do that. But here's the problem. Do you always have access to a printer? No. So this is why I'm showing you this technique today. Because what if somebody sent you this and you need to get it turned around and you have to, like, say you're traveling and all you have is your laptop with you and you've got to get something turned around really quick within the next 30 minutes. Well, you could drive around trying to find a FedEx Kinko's and then good luck waiting in line to get something printed and then you measure it out. Or I could stop off at a Starbucks really quick because there's always one of those around the corner. Stop, open up my laptop, get it, set up my design like this, and if I have my line gauge with me, boom, I can immediately start measuring and get going. Does everybody see that? Of course, the other way that I can do this is import my design like this and then just create a text frame and then just start guessing with the font sizes until it matches up with an overlay. That's a third way that you can go about doing it. It's not as accurate, but you get pretty close. Questions about these ways, these different techniques to measure? All right, so we know that we have a design and we're going to say that this is probably close to like 30 points, right? So I'm going to grab, just to make some notes over here, I'm just going to create a quick little text frame and I'll say notes. So I'll say that that's about 30 points, right? 30 points font size. Okay, again, this is in the pasteboard area, so if I go to preview, you're not going to see it. It's not going to print. Okay. All right, now, I know this is going to be about 30 points. Agreed? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to place a text frame on top of this, but we don't want to put it on the same layer. Furthermore, it would be helpful if this was slightly transparent, just so that I can kind of see what's going on. So we're going to kill two birds with one stone. First off, if your original layer is currently locked, unlock it. I'm going to select what I have placed, and I'm going to go to the Properties panel. So over here in Properties, there should be an option for opacity. And let's just set the opacity to something like, say, 40%. Just so that it can be slightly lighter gray. Once you have that down, go ahead and lock down your layer again. But let's go ahead and create a new layer for our artwork. So, create a new layer for artwork. Again, just like what we did in Illustrator, I'm going to go ahead and double click on layer 2 and I'll call this artwork. There we go. Okay. Now, here's what we want to do. This text happens to be Minion Pro. Okay. Select that and move that up here. There we go. This happens to be Minion Pro. So I know this is Minion Pro. I'm going to grab a type tool and I'm going to click and I'm going to create a text frame. So I could do that. Maybe this looks like it's centered. Does everybody agree? Okay. So I'm just going to grab and just create a text frame within my margins like this. And I'm going to make sure that I'm set to Minion Pro 30 points because that's what I measured. And this is going to be centered. So I'm going to make sure that I have text alignment set to centered. And I'll just type out the final design like that. Next, I want to make sure that the vertical alignment of my text is also set to the center of my text frame. How do you get to your text frame options to change that? Now wait before you guys start. Remember, you can't measure anything if you're not at 100%. No reason to start measuring right now. How do I move my text to be vertically aligned in the center? How do I get to text frame options?
Right-click.
Yeah, I could right click on it if it was selected and choose text frame options. I could go up to object and go to text frame options. What's the keyboard shortcut?
Command B.
Command B, because B stands for text frame. Command B. And remember, you have this vertical justification. I can center that there, and there it is. Now it's centered. However, does it match? Let's back up for a second, and let's just double check. First off, does it look like 30 points is in fact the right font size? Yeah, right? Okay, good. So we know it's Minion Pro. I think we've nailed the font size based on our measurements. I think we're okay with that. But it doesn't line up. Okay? Why doesn't it line up? Yeah. So look at the spacing of the letters. Can we agree that the spacing of my letters is spaced further apart in the original design? Okay? Now, this is because of one of two measurements. It could be both. It's definitely because of one, but it could be both of these. The two measurements that we're going to be talking about are spacing measurements or adjustments, and they are called tracking and kerning. Tracking and kerning. Here is the definition. Tracking is spacing between all characters in a measure or a line of text. Tracking is spacing between all characters in a measure or line of text. Measure just means line of text. Spacing between all characters in a measure. Notice I said characters and not letters. Why is that important? Well, when I say characters and not letters.
Letters is the whole word.
Well, letters could be just letters, though, right?
Hidden characters?
What could also, right? So what else could be in a line, a measure of text? Not just letters, but also punctuation, numbers, white space characters, hidden characters, right? Everyone with me on that? Okay, so it's not just about spacing between letters. It's all characters in a measure. Okay? All characters in a measure. And it includes hidden characters as well, right? And remember, if you go up to view, or excuse me, type, you can click on show hidden characters and you can see those hidden characters, right? That's something that we could actually do. Don't need that right now. So tracking allows us to adjust the spacing between all characters in a line of text. Kerning, K-E-R-N-I-N-G, kerning, K-E-R-N-I-N-G, is the space between two characters, just two characters. Kerning is the spacing between two characters. So tracking is spacing between all characters in a measure. Kerning is only the adjustment of white space between two characters. Okay? Questions about those definitions? So kerning is really fine-tuning your spacing, right? Because you're only adjusting the spacing between two characters in a line. Whereas tracking, you're kind of, it's more of a generalized amount of spacing that you're applying. So, here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and highlight this. And let's go ahead and let's adjust our tracking. So, to do this, I want to bring up my character palette. So, let's go to Window. And where can I find character under Window? Everybody remember? Where do you find your character palette? Yeah, so remember, there's no character palette up here. You have to come all the way down to type in tables to find the character palette. Does everybody remember that? All right, let's grab that. All right, so here's what I want. What we're going to do is we're going to look at these two boxes right here. This first box with the V and the A, does everybody see these? And there's a little slash between the V and the A. Does everybody see that? That's kerning. So this one is kerning. We'll come back to that one in just a minute. This one is your tracking. Notice when I move my mouse over it, it actually gives me a little tooltip, and it tells me what? That tracking is measured in what? What does it say? Measured in thousandths of what? An M. So look, once again, let me bring this up. Check this out. Here's the tooltip. Tracking. Does everyone see in parentheses? In thousandths of an M. Or EM. Does everybody see that? Okay. What the heck does that mean? It's like, wait a minute. What does that mean? Well, first off, let's click on this drop down. Let's just see what options we've got. Everybody see these options? Do you notice any units of measurement there? Does it say points, like the font size does? Does it say picas, like our rulers are set to, or inches, any of that? No. You just get whole numbers, don't you? Right? And it's giving you just a range of numbers, by the way. You don't have to pick any of these. You can type in whatever number you want. But also notice, these numbers are both positive and what? Negative. Both kerning and tracking are measured in thousandths, 1,000th of an M. So when you see EM, it's said as M, just the letter M. Okay? The sound M. EN is N, as in like the letter N. Both of these are very important measurements when you're talking about typesetting. 1M, 1EM. Let me make sure I'm typing this out so everybody knows what it is that I'm talking about here. 1M. Does everybody see how I'm saying M? Okay, let me put this in white so everyone can see it. There we go. All right. 1M is equal to the font size. So, what is the font size of our design? 30 points. So, 1M is equal to 30 points. What if my font size was 16 points? 1M would be equal to 16 points. What if my font size was 10 points? 1M would be equal to 10 points. Everybody see how that works? Okay. So 1M is equal to the font size. So in our case, it's 30 points. 1N, see the EN, is equal to half of the font size. So what is 1N in our example? What was it? 15 points. Why 15? Yeah, because half of 30 is 15. M and N are dynamic measurements. They're dynamic because they change based on some other variable, in our case, the font size. These measurements are very, very, very important to learn. I will be moving forward after Thanksgiving. I'll be giving you a lot of measurements that are going to be based on these two, an M and an N, which means you need to know the font size before you know how to actually calculate M's and N's. These measurements are also used digitally in things like animation, gaming, web design. These are important measurements. Not only that, when we start learning how to shape the page with our layout, these will come back and play a big role in exactly how we measure things and how we lay out elements on a page. There is also one other measurement that I want to point out, and that is called one lead. One lead. Does anybody want to know what this is based on? Leading. Good guess. Absolutely correct. Does everybody remember what leading is? Leading is the measurement of what? Baseline to baseline. So when you have a multi-line typeset, Baseline to baseline is your leading. Okay? So 1 lead is equal to whatever your leading is. So if this was a paragraph of text and it was set to say 12-point font and 16 points of leading, right? 1M is 12 points. 1N is 6 points. 1 lead, 16 points, right? Because that's my leading. You see how that works? Okay. These measurements help us in typesetting. Later on down the line, we'll talk about things. Like, for instance, indentions. How much should you indent a line? Well, it's based on these measurements, right? When you are talking about hyphenation, there are hyphens, there are M dashes, and there are N dashes. Those measurements are based on this. When you are setting things up on a page, the gutter is going to be based around this. There's a lot of things in these measurements that really will help us out, but I want to make sure everybody is with me on this. When we're talking about tracking, so all these characters, right, the spacing in our characters, tracking is based on 1/1000th of an M. So if I were to select all of my text and I were to adjust my tracking here, these are all measurements that are 1,000th of an M. So this is 5/1000ths of an M. Can we agree? That's a fairly small amount of size. Okay? So, here's what we're going to do. We are going to change the tracking. Now, there are 2 ways that you can go about doing this. I can select, and by the way, you can track within 1 word if you wanted to. But let's select the entire line. So triple click to select the entire line. And you can come over here to the drop down and we can adjust the tracking. So I can have a positive amount of tracking. I can have a negative amount of tracking. And of course, depending on how much negative tracking I have, I can do whatever I want. I can make those characters look ridiculous, right? Does everybody see that? However, can we agree that trying to adjust your tracking by clicking on a drop-down menu can be a little tedious? So I want to show you another way, a keyboard shortcut to adjust tracking. With that line selected, look at your keyboard. Find the Option key. Option. Okay, hold down the Option key. Then I want you to look at the arrow keys. Left arrow will collapse the tracking. Right arrow will increase the tracking. So let's collapse the tracking until we're at -40. Thereabouts. Does that look better? Better than what it was, yes? It's not perfect yet, but it's better. We good? All right, so Option and the arrow keys, left and right, will allow you to quickly adjust the overall tracking within whatever you have highlighted. Next, let's talk about kerning. So remember, tracking is the space between all the characters in a line, or an individual word if you want to go that route. Kerning, though, is spacing between what? What did I give you the definition of? Between what?
Between 2 characters?
Right, 2 characters, correct, River. 2 characters. So here's what I want you to do with the cursor. Come over here and put the cursor between the H and the E. H and the E. All right, can we see that the spacing between the H and the E in my design is actually a little bit further apart than the original? Okay. Now that you have the insertion point between 2 characters, we're going to use the same keyboard shortcut. However, I could come over here to this drop down. Does everybody see where it says right now 0 in my kerning? And I could just do the same thing here. I can actually set up, different amount of kerning. So now that my cursor's here, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm just going to kind of go left. until these shapes kind of look like I have the same amount of spacing. Now notice that's kind of pulling the rest of my design away. Does everybody see that? Which tells me a couple of things. My tracking is probably within the ballpark, if not exactly on it. But there's some other kerning issues going on in this design. Does everybody see that? So look how the faint original artwork, how that's kind of spaced evenly now behind the one that I'm actually typing in. So everybody see how they, if I were to move this text frame over, that should line up, right? Right. This is where one area of trying to lay out and get kerning and tracking at the same time absolutely spot on accurate. If you're trying to do it within an entire line of text, when you make one adjustment, that throws everything else off. Does everybody see that? So for instance, look at the period at the end of the line. Can everyone agree that spacing is off between the end? Like the end's almost exactly on it, but notice the original one, the period is further to the left. So can we agree that the kerning between the end and the period needs to be adjusted? But if I go and I start making an adjustment like that, look how everything else kind of gets pulled. Does everybody see that? So this kind of becomes a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole when you're trying to do this to one entire line. So here's a couple ways that you can get around that. First off, I'm going to leave this original design that I've been working on right here. This is close though, right? Can we agree? I'm getting close. This is very close. But is it perfect? No. Remember, the name of this game is to be accurate. Agreed? Okay. So here's another way that we can go about doing this. Instead of worrying about trying to figure out all the tracking and all the kerning all at once for an entire line, focus on one word at a time. Let me say that again. Instead of trying to apply and adjust your kerning and your tracking of every single word in a line all at once, okay? And playing a game of whack-a-mole. Put kerning over here, well that changes this over here. Put kerning over there, that changes this over here, okay? Instead, I've got my type where I kind of want it right now, but I need fine-tuning it. Go one word at a time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide and lock down my artwork layer. I'm just going to create another one, and I'll just call this, I don't know, working layer or something. Just something that I can actually work with. And I'm just going to grab my type tool, and I'm just going to create some text, using the same font and the same size. And I'm going to position that over my text, like this. Okay? And I'm going to figure out what the kerning needs to be here between the E and the H. You see how that now lines up perfectly? So the kerning between the E and the H actually needs to be, in this case, -80. And there's no tracking involved in that. See how I figured that out? So what? Let me show you again. So I'm going to grab a type tool. Just grab a box. Type the word out that I need. Make sure I change it to the right size. And then I'm just going to place that over the original text. There it is. So T and H line up just fine. Notice how the E is off. Well, that's because I need to add kerning. So I'm going to put the cursor between there, hold down the Option key, use my left arrow, get it to where it lines up. There it is. Come over here. That happens to be -80. So now I know, in my first word, the spacing that I need between the H and the E is -80 on my kerning.
But
Question?
if they're still all connected on the original word, and you put -80, it's still going to move the other two words.
Correct. Now I have to do it for the other two words. So now I need to go in there and, so the idea is you're trying to figure out, you're going to adjust any tracking that needs to be adjusted first, and then you're going to figure out the kerning between each of the individual letters.
Yeah, but if you change them, they're still gonna change the other words.
We're doing one word.
They are, but we're doing one word at a time. And then once we know where the kerning needs to be adjusted in each word, we can go back and apply that to the original line of text, and then everything should line up.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're breaking it down into smaller chunks is what I'm trying to say. Okay, now, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Would you want to do this with a paragraph of text? No, right? So this really only works well when we're talking about headlines or what we would call display text. Now, here are two new terms that we're going to add to our vocabulary. So if you're taking notes, write these down. Display text and body copy. Display text and body copy. Display text is typesetting that is set to fonts greater than 15 points. So if the font size is greater than 15 points, it's display text. Is our font size here greater than 15 points? Absolutely. Body copy, 15 points or less. So if I was laying out a title or a headline, that would be display text. Agreed? So usually those are going to be larger than 15 points. If I'm laying out paragraphs of text, that's body copy. Because typically paragraph of text would be less than 15 points. Now obviously, if you're talking about like a giant poster or something, those, these are rules, but rules are made to be broken. But for the most part, display text versus body copy, it's going to be based on these particular font sizes. If I needed to do this with a paragraph, this would drive me insane. Typically speaking, paragraphs, you should not have to encounter things where people are like adjusting kerning in paragraphs on a word-by-word basis within multiple paragraphs of text. Okay? You're generally not going to have to deal with this in body copy. Now, there is an exception we'll talk about when we come back from Thanksgiving, when we talk about things like widows. Actually, we'll talk about this on Wednesday. Widows and orphans. Okay? Now, those terms you may conjure other things than typesetting rules, but we're going to talk about what a widow and an orphan is when we're dealing with typesetting and what those terms actually mean to us as layout artists, not necessarily from a cultural standpoint. Okay? We're not actually going to be talking about real orphans and real widows. We okay with that? No? Don't like orphans and widows? We okay? All right, so we'll talk about that a little bit later on and how tracking and kerning can affect this. So as I'm going through here, I may actually want to sit here and just kind of play around with this. I can say, okay, well, final, right? Set that up, do that 30 points. I can drag that down, try to get that kind of lined up where it should be. Of course, that guide really helps. And in this case, the entire thing is just a little bit off, so I may want to adjust my tracking. So there we go. I did tracking at negative 40, and that looks pretty good. The A, though, is still a little off, so I may adjust the kerning there. And that's a negative 40 on the kerning on that one. So as you're kind of playing around with this, see how I'm doing one word at a time? I would be making notes. Okay? This technique works well, or at least gets you really close, if you're working with headlines, display text. Right? You're not working with an entire paragraph of text. Okay? But sometimes it's only enough to kind of get you close. But this is a better, accurate way of doing it than simply just guessing and playing whack-a-mole. Is everybody with me on this? Any questions about this? Now, in the old days, here's how you would have to do it. You would take your printed copy, something like this, okay? You would do your layout, And then you would take your layout with the original and you'd come over to something like this, which doesn't work. This is our light table. It must be unplugged. There's a giant light in this particular table. Have we ever done any tracing in here before? Have we done tracing? Have you seen how tracing paper works? Okay, same kind of concept. Except this would shine a light behind my actual design, and then when I put my design over it, kind of like how we have things lined up here digitally, you can see things lined up on this light table. Well, there's a lot of back and forth doing that manually, right? Additionally, if you aren't able to actually lay out a design like this, and you have to constantly print out proofs, bring it to the light table, lay it down, make your measurements, make your marks, this letter needs to be closer, this letter needs to be closer, this letter needs to be further apart, and then take it back to the computer, make your adjustments, print out another one, bring it over to the light table. You see how there's a lot of back and forth in that? Okay? This may seem like a lot of work to have to do this like on an individual work basis, but you're typically only going to do that for things like titles or headlines. Okay? But it's a lot easier doing this than having to make an adjustment, print it out, take it to the light table. Take it to the computer, make your adjustment, print it out, take it to the light table. And make that kind of merry-go-round aspect of your actual design. Okay? Questions? Okay. How are we feeling about this so far? Okay. Last thing that I want to talk about. Go ahead and let's create a new document. So just file new, and I want you to go up to print, and we're going to choose letter size. Just keep everything else as the default, please. Letter size. Two things I want to point out. Number one, when we created this document, did I say anything about margins? No. So, what if we messed up the margins when we created this? And I've already started doing all my layout. Can we say that could be a bit of a problem? Right? Let me show you how to adjust the margins after you've already created the document. Go up to the File menu and choose Document Setup. It's going to be about 2/3 of the way down. Document Setup. Has everybody found it? Click on that. Here, you have the ability to actually change your margins. I want you to unlink this, and I want the bottom margin to be twice the size of the top. So 6 picas, please. 3 picas all around except for the bottom. I want it to be twice the size. Which, by the way, is a traditional margin measurement. We'll talk more about that later. Did everybody get that? Click OK. You should see the margin down here at the bottom now grow. Everybody got it? Good. Grab your type tool. Let's go ahead and create a text frame. Doesn't really matter what the size is. We'll leave the font size as it is. Go ahead and fill it with placeholder text. So how do we do that? Where do we go to fill it with placeholder text? Type menu. Okay, good. Then, where is that? Yeah, it's towards the bottom, right? Fill with placeholder text. So go to the type menu, click fill with placeholder text. Convert it to 2 columns. How do we do that? Where do we go to change the text frame to 2 columns? Text frame options. Where do we find those? I could right click on this, or where else? Object menu, or what's the keyboard shortcut? Command what? B, because B stands for text frame. It doesn't really, I'm just joking. So, change it from 1 column to 2 column. We've done that before. We'll leave the gutter set up as 1 pica. We're good on that. All right, we have 1 column of text. Agreed? All right. Now, here's what I want to talk about real quick. 2 things. Let's look at text alignment for a moment. How is this body copy? Can we agree this is body copy? 15 points or less, right? It's body copy. It's 12 points. How is this body copy aligned? How would you define or describe the alignment of this body copy? Based on terms you already know. To the left. Do we agree? Is this left aligned text? How do we know it's left aligned text? What are some of the visual cues that we have that this is left aligned? Okay, let's flesh that out a little bit more. Thoughts? Let's critically think about this. How do we know this is left aligned? I mean, you're right, it is left aligned, but how do we know that?
Everything lines up on the left.
Yeah, we could just be really simple, right? Everything lines up flush on the left side. Agreed? Okay, so the left side of these paragraphs line up flush with the left side of the column. So left side of the column. Okay? However, does the right side of my text also line up flush with the right side of the columns? Or are they slightly off every other line? Yeah, they're slightly off, right? Does everybody see that? How, like, you can kind of see if I were to draw a line here, how it's just kind of slightly off. Does everybody see that? Okay. This is called a ragged line. Left alignment is also known as ragged right, because the right side is ragged. Does everybody see those terms? Left align is also known as ragged right. So if your art director were to come up to you and go, hey, just make sure you typeset this body copy as ragged right. Well, what are they telling you in just that statement? Body copy is 15 points or less, and ragged right means left align. Does everybody see those terms? Okay. I'm trying to teach you these terms because you'll come across these terms in the industry all the time. Somebody will come up to you and go, oh yeah, just make sure that your copy's set to rag right, you're fine. Okay? However, could I change that? Absolutely. I can select all of these and I can go to my paragraph palette, which again is under type and tables. And I have all of these options here for alignment all up at the top. Does everybody see these? So these first three you should be familiar with. Left align. What's the next button over? Center align, right? So you're having both ragged left and ragged right. Everything is centered. What's the third button for? Right align. So if this is right align, what else could we call this based on what I told you about left align and being ragged right? Ragged left, absolutely. So ragged left means right align. Then we have 4 buttons here in the middle. This one, this one, this one, and this one. What are those alignments for? Square, yeah, they look square. What would you call these? Yeah, these are not ragged, right? If they're not ragged, what's the other term that we call it? It starts with a J. Justified. Okay? In fact, if you put your mouse over this, it'll give you a little tooltip. That's why I was moving very quickly, because I didn't want to give you guys the answer already. So this one is justified with a last line that's aligned left, or ragged right. This one is justified with the last line aligned in the center. And this one's justified with the last line aligned right, or ragged left. Now, if I click on this first justified option, look at how different my paragraphs look. Everybody see that? Okay. Notice the left side of the text is aligned with the left side of the column. The right side of the text is flush with the right side of the column. If both sides of my text is aligned to the sides of my column like this, and they're flush, this is justified text. How the last line is handled, though, in every paragraph is the difference between these 3 options. So if you just look at these last lines, so I have Maximus,
labo omenaku ubius, and masunt and aquatum. It's been a while since I've read Latin, but there you go. If I click on one of these other justification options, if I click on this one, the last line is centered. If I click on this one, the last line is right aligned. But if I click on this last option right here, this is called fully justified. That means everything is adjusted so that every single line is aligned flush left and aligned flush right. However, does that look good? Why not?
The spacing's off.
What do you mean by spacing is off? The spacing of what?
Between the words.
Yeah. So look at the in my example. Your example may be different because you got different Latin text. But if you look at my example, does everybody see all of those open spaces that have been created? The additional white space that has been created between the words. Okay. We'll talk about how to handle these later on, but those are called rivers. What I mean by that, if you take a look at this, that white space, if you kind of flow down the page, kind of flow like a bending river down in a valley. So everybody see that? Those are called rivers. They're opened up in the text. It's not ideal. So, alignment. Left align, ragged right. Center align. Right align, ragged left. I got justify with the last line, align left or ragged right. Justify with the last line, centered. Justify with the last line, aligned right or ragged left. Or I can fully justify, which is a bit of a problem. Now, one thing you need to know about with justified text. When you have justified text, it is always best to make sure that your paragraph is hyphenated. Because if I uncheck hyphenation, you may actually have rivers that open up in the text. Does everybody kind of see the slight rivers that have opened up here? Series with hyphenation. Everything looks good. Without hyphenation, you can start to see some rivers begin to open up. Okay? Now, there are some people, some art directors will come in and tell you, we don't want any hyphenation whatsoever. Well, that's fine if you're doing something like, say, left align. Left align without any hyphenation, you can have a ragged end of your measure. It's fine. It's good. Okay? But if they come in and they say, hey, no hyphenation and I want it justified, there's going to be some adjustments we're going to have to make, right? So we'll talk about these a little bit later on down the line. Any questions about alignment? Nope. Okay. Finally, one little bit of white space that I want to show everybody. So check this out. Let's say I am doing an address. Okay. So, Tarrant County College. What goes on the next line of an address? Yeah, the street address, right? All right. Now, if you were typing this out, how would you go to create that next line? This is not a trick question. How would you? You'd hit the enter key, right? You would enter. Now, real quick, I'm going to put on show hidden characters here. So if I hit return, what the heck? Why is my hidden characters not showing up? Oh, right. There we go. All right. Let me do that again. So, Tarrant County College, I hit return. Everybody see the Pilcrow? Okay. What does the Pilcrow mean? The end of what? End of a paragraph. Is the name Tarrant County College an actual paragraph? No, right? So, I mean, if I did 828 Harwood Road, and I put, and I put another return, that's another paragraph ending that I've just done, right? Hurst, Texas, and I have no idea what our zip code is, but something like that, okay? Now, visually speaking, this looks like an address, agreed? But what have I really created? How many paragraphs have I now created? Not two, actually, I've created 3, right? First paragraph ends with a Pilcrow, start a new paragraph. Second line ends in a Pilcrow, I start another paragraph. That third line is actually a new paragraph. That little hashtag just means the end of the text. But that's also a paragraph. I've started another paragraph.
I have not created a 3-line address. I have created 3 paragraphs. So let me show you a different way and a better way of doing this. Instead of putting a Pilcrow here at the end of college just by hitting return, I'm going to use what's called a forced line break. Here's what you do. Look at your keyboard. Here's how you do that. If you were to hit return right now, it would create that Pilcrow, right? I don't want that. Before hitting the return, hold the shift key down and then hit return. Do you see how I don't have a Pilcrow there anymore? If I just hit the return, does everybody see the Pilcrow? If I do shift return, does everyone see that like sideways looking L? Okay? That's a forced line break. I could do the same thing here. So I have a forced line break and a forced line break. And then, so basically this is one paragraph separated into 3 different lines instead of it being 3 paragraphs. Does everybody see that? This is important because when you're laying out elements like this or display text headings, and you want certain words to show up in different lines, or you want to break up spacing between lines, don't do it by adding unnecessary paragraphs. Do it by adding a forced line break. And right now, it may be like, well, what's the difference? I haven't told you yet, but this will become important later on. Don't add unnecessary white space characters or create new text elements like paragraphs if you don't mean to do so, if they're not needed. If it's not an actual paragraph, don't create a new paragraph. If all you're doing is pushing something down to another line, use a line break. Because that still needs to be part of another paragraph. Again, this will become apparent when we start really talking about laying out body copy and dealing with things like orphans and widows. We don't want to create new paragraphs to fix problems. We want to use line breaks to do that. Questions? All right. So, real quick, here's your assignment. On Canvas. This will be due at the end of class on Wednesday. If my modules want to load up. There we go. Assignment 16. You just got done doing the designing for tomorrow where you had a article that you had kind of lay out based on the measurements that you've had. Okay, so this one, you printed it out, you measured it with your line gauge, right? And you did your best to actually replicate the layout. That's great. This one is going to require a little bit more work because if we scroll down here, there is an original layout. And if I download this, this will actually open up this PDF here. In fact, let me go to actual size. Come on. There we go. Perfect. So look at this layout right here. Observations. Top part is what? Display text or body copy? Display text. Why? Because it's bigger than 15 points. Can we agree? Okay. Down at the bottom, how many columns do we have? 2. And is that body copy or display text? Body copy. Great. Now, in the assignment sheet, I've told you exactly which fonts you're going to use. It's Times for your display text. And for your body copy, it's Minion Pro. The body copy is aligned how? How is the body copy aligned? Left or ragged right. Agreed? Okay. Now, there is no kerning or tracking in the body copy. You don't have to make any adjustments there. You just have to lay out the text. However, there's a small problem. I haven't given you the copy. What I gave you was a PDF. Here's the neat thing about PDFs. If you were to download this PDF and open it in either Preview or Acrobat, this text is highlightable and selectable. and you can copy and paste the text. But there's a small issue with this. If I were to copy this and paste it in a word editor, like say TextEdit, it copy and pasted it, didn't it? But do you also notice that the PDF, when you copy and paste text from a PDF, it also interprets the end of a line as a new paragraph. So where it says we at the end of the first line, that's actually a new paragraph. So you have a bunch of extra pilpros in here that you don't need. So when you go to copy and paste the text, two things I would recommend you do. Number one, go back in, turn on show hidden characters, and see where it added all that extra white space stuff. Remove those. Okay? Then, when you do have a new paragraph, make sure you do have the proper pilpro there. Compare it to the original text. Are we okay with that? Can we agree though? That's a lot easier than having to retype everything. Okay? Quick little edits on a few things with white space. A lot easier than me having to sit here and have to retype it all. However, can you guarantee that the text you've copied out of that PDF is copying over correctly? No. So, one of the things you need to get used to doing, proofing anything that you've been given based on the original design. So even though you can copy and paste from this file, when you paste it in, you got to make sure any additional white space characters are removed, right? And all of basically the words are spelled correctly. Sometimes PDFs may interpret an O as a 0, or vice versa. Sometimes they may interpret hyphenation, and thankfully you don't really have any hyphenation in here. They may interpret hyphenation as extra dashes all over the place. They may get the punctuation wrong. I only have 2 columns of text here. When you copy and paste it in, don't just assume everything is correct. Proof it before you get done. With me so far? Now, that text down at the bottom doesn't need any kerning or tracking. This text up here does. The John of St. Cloud loves to go ice fishing every January. Okay? That's the one you're going to spend more time doing typesetting on for this assignment. Notice, I'm not giving you a ton of background on this other than the fact that here are the fonts that you're going to be using. Feel free to measure this however you want. Notice though, this is an 8.5 by 11 size page and this PDF has trim marks on it. So if you were to print this out, make sure you print it at 100%. Don't scale it, because if you scale it down, you'll get the wrong measurements because it will scale to include the crop marks. So when you go to print this out, print it out at 100%. And you'll get a warning. Hey, this is going to print out bigger than your 8.5 by 11 size paper. I don't care. Print. So that you can get your measurements right. Or do what we did digitally to do your measurements. Questions about this? So it's going to be kind of like you're just going to have to figure this one out a little bit based on what we've talked about. So get your measurements first, either by doing it digitally like I showed you today, or by printing it out and doing it like you did in the last assignment. And I want you to recreate this design. Notice in the bottom margin, and I did tell you what margins to use in the assignment instructions. There's a place for your name. Typeset that, Minion Pro, bold, giving you the font size. I think it's 12 points in the assignment sheet. Just place it down there in the margin to the best of your ability. Questions? So you'll be due end of class on Wednesday. That's it. I know that was a long one. Thank you all very much.